Working late, huh?
David, I can explain.
Don't. I've seen everything.
The phone buzzed at 6:14 a.m., jolting me awake like a slap across the face. Cambria's name glowed on the screen, and even before I read her message, I knew it would ruin my morning. It always did these days. Working for my ex again. If something doesn't suit you, leave my house. I stared at those words until they burned into my retinas. My house? The house my father Don legally owned, the one where I'd been paying the mortgage for 8 years while she climbed her corporate ladder? The audacity was breathtaking, even for Cambria. My name is Rhett Vossin, and I used to think I knew my wife. Turns out I was married to a stranger who wore Cambria's face and spoke with her voice, but had the heart of a calculating machine. She stood in the doorway now, her platinum hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, wearing that charcoal business suit that cost more than most people's rent. "You got my message," she said, not looking up from her phone. Her manicured fingers tapped against the screen with mechanical precision. "I got it." I sat up, running my hand through my hair. "Working for Mason again, huh? How convenient." Mason Reddan, her ex-boyfriend from college, now some hotshot CEO with more money than sense and apparently more charm than me. They'd reconnected at a business conference 3 months ago, and ever since, Cambria had been different. Colder, more distant, more entitled. "It's a good opportunity," she said, finally glancing at me. Her green eyes held no warmth, just calculation. "Something you wouldn't understand." The dismissal in her voice made my jaw clench. I owned a small construction supply business. Nothing glamorous, but honest work that paid our bills, and then some. Apparently, that wasn't impressive enough for the new Cambria. "Right, because I'm just a simple contractor who couldn't possibly grasp the complexities of corporate politics." She shrugged, already losing interest in the conversation. "Your words, not mine." I watched her gather her things. Expensive purse, designer coffee tumbler, the latest model phone that Mason had probably bought her. Everything about her screamed money and status, things she'd never cared about when we first married 10 years ago. "Where's Tamsin?" I asked, referring to our 15-year-old daughter. "Still sleeping. She has that science project due today, but she'll manage." Cambria paused at the bedroom door. "I'll be working late again. Don't wait up." Working late, right. More like working under Mason, but I kept that thought to myself. For now. After she left, I made coffee and tried to process what was happening to my marriage. The signs had been there for months. The secretive phone calls, the sudden interest in expensive clothes, the way she flinched when I touched her. I'd been telling myself it was just work stress, that she'd come back to me once this phase passed, but that text message felt like a declaration of war. I was still brooding over my coffee when Tamsin wandered into the kitchen, looking like a typical teenager who'd rather be anywhere else. She had Cambria's blonde hair but my brown eyes, though lately those eyes held the same distant look as her mother's. "Mom already left?" she asked, grabbing a granola bar from the pantry. "Yeah, big important meeting with her new boss." Tamsin rolled her eyes. "Mason's not that important. He just acts like he is." "Interesting. So she knew about Mason." "You've met him?" "Mom brought him to the school fundraiser last week. He kept talking about his car and his penthouse like anyone cared." She shouldered her backpack. "Can you drive me to school? Mom was supposed to, but obviously that's not happening." I nodded, grateful for something normal to focus on. But as I drove Tamsin to school, she dropped another bombshell. "Mom's been asking weird questions about Grandpa Don's house," she said, staring out the passenger window. "Like who really owns it, and whether you're on any of the paperwork." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What kind of questions?" "I don't know. Legal stuff. She made me promise not to tell you." Tamsin looked at me then, and I saw a flicker of the little girl she used to be. But it felt wrong, keeping secrets from you. After dropping her off, I drove straight to my father's house, the same house where Cambria and I lived, where we'd raised Tamsin, where I'd foolishly thought we were building a life together. Don was in his workshop, tinkering with an old radio like he'd been doing since I was a kid. "Morning, son. You look like someone stole your lunch money." I managed a weak smile. Don Vossin was pushing 70, but still sharp as a tack. He'd worked construction his whole life, saved every penny, and bought the house outright in 1995. When Cambria and I got married, he'd let us move in with the understanding that we'd eventually inherit it. The deed was still in his name, something Cambria had apparently forgotten. "Dad, has anyone been asking you about the house? Legal questions, ownership stuff?" Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. His weathered hands stilled on the radio. Funny you should ask. Got a call yesterday from some lawyer's office wanting to know about property transfers and such. Told them to mind their own business. He looked up at me with concern. Everything all right with you in Cambria? I wanted to lie, to protect him from the mess my marriage had become. But the words tumbled out anyway. The distance, the late nights, Mason, the text message. Don listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. So she thinks she can just kick you out of my house? He said finally. Looks that way. Don stood up, brushing sawdust from his hands. Well, she's got another thing coming. This is still my property, and I decide who lives here. Not some fancy lawyer she hired. The rest of the day passed in a blur of work calls and supply deliveries, but my mind kept circling back to Cambria's betrayal. It wasn't just the affair, though that stung plenty. It was the calculated way she was dismantling our life together, piece by piece, like she was following some master plan. That evening, she came home after 10, reeking of expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. She barely acknowledged me, just grabbed a bottle of wine and disappeared into her home office. I could hear her on the phone, voice low and intimate, punctuated by soft laughter that used to be reserved for me. I crept closer to the door, hating myself for eavesdropping, but unable to stop. He has no idea what's coming, she was saying. The house will be the tricky part, but my lawyer thinks we can challenge the ownership. After that, it's just a matter of dividing assets. Mason's voice was barely audible through the phone, but I caught enough to make my stomach turn. Can't wait to have you all to myself. Upgrade from that blue-collar loser. Cambria's laugh was like glass breaking. Soon, baby. Very soon. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding with rage and humiliation. So that was her game. Not just to leave me, but to take everything in the process. The house, our savings, probably even custody of Tamsin. She wanted to erase me completely and start fresh with Mason. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. I spent the rest of the night in the garage pretending to organize tools while my mind raced with possibilities. Cambria thought she held all the cards because she had Mason's money and connections behind her. What she didn't realize was that I had something more valuable, the truth and the patience to use it properly. By morning, I had the beginnings of a plan. The next few days were torture, pretending everything was normal while Cambria flaunted her betrayal. She'd started staying out until midnight, claiming client dinners and strategy sessions. When she was home, she treated me like furniture, something inconvenient that she had to navigate around. But I was watching, learning, gathering information. I started with the basics, checking our joint accounts and credit cards. What I found made my jaw drop. Cambria had been spending money like it was going out of style, expensive dinners, hotel rooms, shopping sprees that would make a lottery winner blush. All of it charged to our accounts, of course. She was funding her affair with my money. The hotel charges were particularly interesting. Always the same place, the Grand View, downtown's most expensive hotel, always the same room number. I cross-referenced the dates with her supposed work schedule and found a pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork. I also discovered she'd opened a separate checking account without telling me. The statements were being sent to her office, but a little creative social engineering with the bank got me the information I needed. Mason had been making regular deposits. Not huge amounts, but enough to give Cambria a taste of the lifestyle he was promising. The really damaging evidence came from an unexpected source. Tamsin had been acting strange, spending more time on her phone and less time talking to either of us. When I finally asked her about it, she broke down crying. Mom made me promise not to tell, she sobbed. But she's been asking me to spy on you. What time you come home, who you talk to, whether you seem suspicious about anything. My own daughter turned into an informant. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Cambria had done to me directly. She said it was for the divorce, Tamsin continued, that you might try to hide money or something, and she needed to protect us. What else did she tell you? That we'd be moving in with Mason soon, that his penthouse has a pool and I could have my own bathroom. Tamsin looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. I don't want to move, Dad. I like it here. This is home. I hugged her tight, making a silent promise that she wouldn't have to leave if she didn't want to. But first, I needed more ammunition. That's when I remembered Brick Mendoza. Brick ran a boxing gym downtown, the kind of place where guys like me went to work out frustrations and stay in shape. But Brick also had connections throughout the city. Guys who knew guys, people who could find information that wasn't readily available through normal channels. I found him in his usual spot, wrapping his hands before a training session. Brick was built like his nickname suggested, with arms like tree trunks and a face that had seen its share of fights. but he had a sharp mind for business and an even sharper sense of loyalty. "Rhett, haven't seen you in a while. How's the family?" "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." I glanced around the gym, making sure we were alone. "I need some information on someone. Mason Reddan. Ever heard of him?" Brick's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "The real estate guy?" "Yeah, I know him. Or know of him anyway. Word is he's not as solid as he pretends to be." "What do you mean?" "Leveraged up to his eyeballs, from what I hear. All flash, no substance. He owes money to some people who don't like waiting for payment." Brick unwrapped his hands, giving me his full attention. "Why you asking?" I told him everything. The affair, the planned divorce, Cambria's schemes to take the house. Brick listened without judgment, nodding occasionally. "So, you want to hit back?" he said when I finished. "I want to protect what's mine. My daughter, my home, my business. If that means hitting back, then yes." Brick was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I might know someone who can help, but this kind of information doesn't come free, and once you start down this road, there's no going back. You sure you want to do this?" I thought about Cambria's laugh on the phone, about Mason calling me a loser, about my daughter being used as a spy. "I'm sure." 2 days later, Brick introduced me to Jessa Rovin. She was Mason's accountant, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who looked like she could balance a budget while performing brain surgery. We met at a diner across town, far from anywhere Cambria or Mason might see us. "Brick says you're having trouble with my boss," Jessa said without preamble, stirring sugar into her coffee. "You could say that. He's having an affair with my wife and apparently planning to help her take me for everything I'm worth." Jessa's laugh was bitter. "Sounds like Mason. He thinks his charm and Daddy's money make him untouchable." She leaned forward. "What if I told you he's not as untouchable as he thinks?" "I'd ask what you want in return?" "Smart man. I want Mason taken down a few pegs. He fired my brother last year for asking questions about some questionable expenses, ruined his career, blacklisted him in the industry. I've been waiting for the right opportunity to return the favor." She slid a manila envelope across the table. "Mason's been cooking his books for years, inflating revenues, hiding debts, paying personal expenses through the company. It's all in there." I opened the envelope, scanning the documents inside. Even with my limited accounting knowledge, I could see the problems. Mason's company was a house of cards, held together by creative bookkeeping and borrowed money. "This is explosive," I said. "That's just the appetizer. Mason owes money all over town, suppliers, contractors, even some private lenders who charge very high interest rates. He's been juggling payments for months, but it's catching up with him." "How do you know all this?" "Because I'm the one who's been juggling them. He thinks I'm loyal because he pays me well, but loyalty doesn't extend to covering up fraud." Jessa finished her coffee and stood up. "Use that information wisely, and when Mason's empire comes crashing down, make sure everyone knows it was his own greed that caused it." That night, I studied the documents until my eyes burned. Mason's financial situation was even worse than Jessa had implied. He was months behind on several major debts, and his company's cash flow was essentially non-existent. The only thing keeping him afloat was new investors who didn't know about the existing problems. But the most interesting discovery was a list of Mason's creditors. Several were small businesses like mine, contractors and suppliers who'd extended credit based on Mason's reputation. If those debts were called in simultaneously, it would create a cascade effect that would destroy his company overnight, and I knew exactly how to make that happen. The next morning, I started making phone calls. I reached out to every name on that creditor list, introducing myself as a potential investor interested in purchasing outstanding debts. It's a common practice in business. Companies sell their receivables to collection agencies for pennies on the dollar just to get immediate cash flow. Most of the creditors were eager to deal. They'd been waiting months for Mason to pay, and the prospect of getting something immediately was appealing. Within a week, I'd quietly purchased over $200,000 in Mason's debts for about 60 cents on the dollar. Cambria had no idea what was coming. She was still playing her game, staying out late and treating me like garbage, secure in her belief that Mason's money would solve all her problems. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning. I'd been watching Mason's routine for weeks, and he was predictably arrogant about his schedule. Every Tuesday at 9 a.m., he had coffee at the same upscale cafe downtown, holding court with other business types who hung on his every word. I arrived early and took a table where I could observe without being noticed. Mason showed up right on schedule, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. He was holding court with 3 other men, regaling them with stories about his latest deals and acquisitions. The key is leverage, he was saying, gesturing with his expensive watch. You use other people's money to build your empire, then pay them back with the profits. It's basic capitalism. If only he knew how leveraged he really was. I waited until he was mid-story, then walked over to his table. Mason Reddan? He looked up, clearly annoyed at the interruption. Do I know you? Rhett Vossin. I think we have some mutual acquaintances. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by amusement. Ah, Cambria's husband. She's told me so much about you. His companions exchanged glances, sensing tension but not understanding its source. I smiled pleasantly, enjoying the moment. I'm sure she has. Actually, I wanted to thank you for the business advice you gave her about leveraging other people's money. I took it to heart. Mason's smile faltered slightly. What do you mean? I pulled out a folder and set it on the table. I mean, I've been leveraging other people's money to buy up your debts. Congratulations. As of yesterday, I own about 40% of what you owe around town. The color drained from Mason's face as he opened the folder and saw the debt assignments. His companions leaned in, reading over his shoulders, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. This is, Mason started, then stopped, clearly trying to process what he was seeing. Legal? Binding? A perfectly legitimate business transaction? Yes, it's all of those things. I sat down uninvited, savoring his discomfort. The interesting thing about buying debt is that you can call it in whenever you want. A full payment, 30 days, standard terms. You can't do this, Mason said, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, I can. And I am. You'll be receiving formal notice later today, but I wanted to tell you personally. Professional courtesy and all that. I stood up, leaving the folder on the table. Oh, and Mason? You might want to have that conversation with Cambria sooner rather than later. I have a feeling her financial situation is about to change dramatically. I walked away, leaving Mason staring at the documents that would destroy his carefully constructed facade. His companions were already asking questions, and I could see the doubt creeping into their faces. Word would spread quickly through their social circle. Mason Reddan was in serious financial trouble. The second phase of my plan kicked in that afternoon. I'd spent weeks identifying Mason's key suppliers and contractors, the ones whose services were essential to his ongoing projects. Using shell companies and intermediaries, I'd quietly approached each of them with an offer they couldn't refuse. The pitch was simple. I would pay their outstanding invoices from Mason immediately in exchange for exclusive contracts with my expanding business. They got immediate cash flow and guaranteed future work. I got leverage over Mason's entire operation. By the end of the week, Mason's construction projects were grinding to a halt. Suppliers stopped delivering materials, contractors walked off job sites. His company's phones were ringing constantly with angry investors and clients demanding explanations. Cambria started feeling the pressure too. She'd been counting on Mason's financial stability to fund their new life together, but suddenly that stability was evaporating. She came home Friday night looking frazzled, her usual composure cracking. Work problems? I asked innocently, looking up from the newspaper. Nothing I can't handle, she snapped, but I could see the worry in her eyes. That's good. I'd hate for you to have to depend on my blue-collar income again. She shot me a venomous look and disappeared into her office, slamming the door behind her. Through the thin walls, I could hear her on the phone with Mason, their voices rising in argument. Told me you had everything under control? Don't know how he found out. Can't afford to wait much longer. The conversation went on for over an hour, growing more heated as it progressed. When Cambria finally emerged, her face was flushed with anger and something else, fear. We need to talk, she said. About what? About the divorce. About dividing our assets fairly and moving on with our lives like adults. I set down my newspaper, giving her my full attention. I'm listening. I want the house, she said bluntly, and half of everything else. In exchange, I'll make sure the custody arrangement is fair and reasonable. The house isn't mine to give. It belongs to my father, remember? We can work something out. Maybe buy him out, or arrange a transfer. There are ways to handle these things. I pretended to consider her proposal. And what about Mason? Does he factor into these plans? Cambria's composure slipped for just a moment. Mason is... That's separate. This is about us, about ending our marriage with dignity. Dignity? I repeated the word like it was foreign. Is that what you call having an affair while planning to steal my home and alienate my daughter? You never what? Never had Tamsin spy on me? Never charged your hotel rooms with Mason to our joint credit card? Never opened a secret bank account to hide money from me? Each accusation hit her like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again, realizing I had evidence. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Long enough. The question is, what are you going to do about it now? She straightened, trying to regain control of the situation. I want you out of this house by the end of the month. If you fight me on this, I'll make sure the divorce gets very ugly, very public. Your business reputation will suffer, and you'll lose far more than just the house. I stood up slowly, letting the threat hang in the air between us. Is that your final offer? It's not an offer, it's what's going to happen. I nodded thoughtfully. In that case, I think you should know something. That financial trouble Mason's been having, it's just getting started. By Monday, he'll be facing bankruptcy. His company will be liquidated, his assets seized, and his reputation destroyed. Cambria stared at me in shock. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that your meal ticket just bounced. Mason can't save you, Cambria. He can't even save himself. You're lying. I pulled out my phone and showed her a news article I'd bookmarked. Reddan development under investigation for financial irregularities. The story had broken that afternoon, thanks to an anonymous tip to a business reporter. You did this, she whispered. I protected my family and my interests, just like you taught me to do. Cambria sank into a chair, the weight of her situation finally hitting her. Without Mason's financial backing, she couldn't afford the lawyers she'd need to fight me. Without the house as leverage, she had no way to force me out. Her entire plan was collapsing. What do you want? She asked. I want you to remember who you're dealing with. I'm not some pushover you can manipulate and discard. I'm the man who built a successful business from nothing, who's been supporting this family while you played corporate games, and I'm the man who just destroyed your boyfriend's empire without breaking a single law. I leaned down so we were eye to eye. So here's my counteroffer. You can stay in this house as long as you behave like a wife and mother. No more Mason, no more affairs, no more schemes, or you can leave right now with whatever you can carry, and we'll let the lawyers sort out the rest. You can't make me choose. I'm not making you do anything. I'm just explaining the consequences of your choices. I straightened up. You have until Sunday to decide. As I walked away, I could hear her crying. Not the manipulative tears she'd used to get her way in the past, but the genuine sobs of someone who'd gambled everything and lost. The trap had sprung perfectly. Sunday came and went, without a word from Cambria. She spent the weekend locked in her office, making phone calls and frantically searching for alternatives. I could hear her trying to reach Mason, but his phone seemed to be going straight to voicemail. The news about his company's financial troubles was spreading, and apparently he was too busy dealing with investigators and creditors to comfort his mistress. Monday morning brought the final piece of the puzzle. Jessa Rovin called me with an update that made everything fall into place. Mason's finished, she said without preamble. The state auditors found everything, the cooked books, the missing money, the fraudulent investor reports. He's looking at serious criminal charges, not just bankruptcy. What about the company? Liquidation starts next week. I've already been contacted by 3 different law firms representing creditors. There was satisfaction in her voice. My brother's been vindicated too. Turns out Mason fired him for asking the right questions about those missing funds. After hanging up, I found Cambria in the kitchen, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usual perfect appearance was disheveled, her makeup smudged, her expensive clothes wrinkled. Mason's not answering his phone, she said without looking up from her coffee. I heard he's been busy with lawyers and federal investigators. She flinched at the word federal. This is all your fault. My fault? I didn't force him to commit fraud. I didn't make you have an affair. I just refused to be the victim in your little drama. You destroyed him out of spite. I protected myself from a man who was helping my wife steal my home and alienate my daughter. If he couldn't handle legitimate business pressure, that's his problem. Cambria finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes. Genuine fear. What happens now? That depends on you. Have you made your choice? She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup like it held the answers to all her problems. Finally, she spoke. I can't stay here. Not after everything that's happened, but I can't afford to leave either. So what are you going to do? I don't know. Her voice was barely a whisper. I gave up everything for Mason. My integrity, my marriage, my relationship with Tamsin. And for what? A fantasy that was built on lies and stolen money? I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, but it was quickly overwhelmed by the memory of all her betrayals. You made your choices, Cambria. Now you get to live with the consequences. Don't you feel anything? Any regret about what you've done to us? I considered the question seriously. I feel regret that it came to this. I regret that you chose Mason over our family. I regret that Tamsin had to see her mother become someone she doesn't recognize. I paused. But I don't regret protecting what's mine. The conversation was interrupted by Tamsin coming downstairs for breakfast. She took one look at her mother's haggard appearance and her father's grim expression, and her shoulders sagged. "Are you guys getting divorced?" she asked quietly. Cambria and I exchanged glances. We'd been so focused on our war that we'd forgotten about the most important casualty, our daughter. "We're working through some problems," Cambria said carefully. "Problems like Mason?" Tamsin's voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. "I'm not stupid, Mom. I know what's been going on." "Tamsin, honey?" "No." Tamsin cut her off. "I'm tired of being in the middle of this. I'm tired of keeping secrets and pretending everything's normal when it's not." She looked at both of us with disappointment that cut deeper than any anger could have. "You're both acting like children, and I'm the only one trying to hold this family together." She grabbed a piece of toast and headed for the door. "I'm staying at Grandpa Don's tonight. Maybe by the time I come back, you'll have figured out how to be adults again." After she left, the house felt hollow. Cambria and I sat in silence, both of us processing our daughter's words. "She's right," Cambria said eventually. "We've been so focused on hurting each other that we forgot about hurting her. You forgot about her when you decided to have an affair and use her as a spy. And you forgot about her when you decided to wage war instead of trying to save our marriage." I wanted to argue, to point out that she'd started this whole mess, but Tamsin's disappointed face kept flashing in my mind. Maybe we were both right, maybe we were both wrong, maybe it didn't matter anymore. "So what now?" I asked. Cambria stood up, straightening her shoulders with visible effort. "Now I pack my things and find somewhere else to live. I'll get a job, rebuild my career, and try to repair my relationship with our daughter." "What about the divorce?" "We'll handle it like civilized people. Fair division of assets, shared custody of Tamsin, no more games or schemes." She looked at me with something approaching respect. "You won, Rhett. You outplayed me completely. The least I can do is lose with some dignity." Over the next few days, Cambria quietly packed her belongings and moved into a small apartment across town. The process was surreal. 10 years of marriage reduced to boxes and suitcases, memories sorted into his and hers piles. She took a job with a smaller firm, a significant step down from her previous position, but honest work that would let her rebuild her reputation. Mason's scandal had tainted everyone associated with him, making it difficult for her to find employment at her previous level. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly amicable. Without Mason's money backing her, Cambria couldn't afford the kind of aggressive legal representation she'd originally planned. We settled on a fair division of assets, with the house remaining in my father's name and Tamsin splitting her time between both parents. Mason himself disappeared from our lives as quickly as he'd entered. The criminal charges were still pending, but he'd already lost everything: his company, his penthouse, his reputation. Last I heard, he was living with his parents in another state, trying to avoid the media attention and creditor lawsuits. 3 months after Cambria moved out, I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when Brick called. "You hear about Mason?" he asked without preamble. "What about him?" "Pleaded guilty to fraud charges yesterday. Got 5 years, but he'll probably serve 3 with good behavior." I absorbed this information without much emotion. Mason had become irrelevant to my life the moment his company collapsed. "What about restitution for the investors he ripped off?" "That's the interesting part. Word is, most of his debts got bought up by some investment group that's been very reasonable about payment plans and settlements. A lot of people who thought they'd lost everything are getting at least some of their money back." I smiled, thinking about the shell company I'd established to manage Mason's debt portfolio. It had been surprisingly profitable, and helping his victims recover their losses felt like the right thing to do. "Good for them," I said. "Everyone deserves a second chance." That evening, Tamsin came over for dinner, our usual Wednesday night tradition. She'd been splitting her time between Cambria's apartment and our house, and while the arrangement wasn't perfect, it was working better than I'd expected. "Mom's dating someone new," she announced over dessert. I paused with my fork halfway to my mouth. "Oh?" "His name is David. He's a teacher at the community college. Mom says he's refreshingly normal." Tamsin grinned. I think that's her way of saying he's not rich or exciting. "How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, I'm glad she's moving on. She seems happier now, more like the mom I remember from when I was little." Tamsin's expression grew more serious. I think losing everything was good for her. It reminded her who she really is underneath all that corporate stuff. I nodded, understanding what she meant. The Cambria I'd married had been ambitious but grounded, driven but not ruthless. Success and Mason's influence had changed her, but maybe failure would change her back. "What about you?" Tamsin asked. "Are you going to start dating again?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on rebuilding my life and business that romance hadn't even crossed my mind. "I don't know. Maybe someday. You should. You're still young, and you deserve to be happy." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Just promise me you'll pick someone normal, too. I don't think I can handle any more drama." I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had in months. Deal. No more drama queens. Later that night, after Tamsin had gone to bed, I found myself on the back porch with a beer, looking out at the yard where she'd played as a child. The house felt different now, not empty, exactly, but changed. The anger and tension that had filled it during the final months of my marriage were gone, replaced by something that felt like peace. My phone buzzed with a text from Dawn. "Saw the news about Mason's sentencing. Justice served?" I typed back, "Justice served. Thanks for standing by me, Dad." Family stands by family. That's what we do. I smiled, thinking about how true that was. Don had never wavered in his support, even when things looked darkest. Tamsin had chosen to stay connected to both her parents despite our failures. Even Brick and Jessa had become unlikely allies in my fight to protect what mattered most. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was in the garage working on a project when a car pulled into the driveway. To my surprise, Cambria got out, looking more like her old self than she had in years. Gone were the expensive clothes and perfect makeup, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater that emphasized her natural beauty. "Hi," she said, suddenly seeming uncertain. "I hope it's okay that I stopped by?" "Of course. Tamsin's at school, but actually I wanted to talk to you." She glanced around the garage, taking in the organized tools and half-finished projects. "You always were good with your hands. I'd forgotten that." I waited, sensing she had something important to say. "I owe you an apology," she began, "not just for the affair or the schemes, but for losing sight of who we used to be, who you've always been." "Cambria, please let me finish." She took a deep breath. "I got caught up in this fantasy of wealth and status, and I convinced myself that what we had wasn't enough, that you weren't enough, but you were always enough, Rhett. I was just too blind to see it." Her words stirred up complicated emotions, anger, sadness, and something that might have been forgiveness. "I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully. "But we can't go back. Too much has happened." "I know. I'm not asking for another chance. I'm just asking for your forgiveness. And maybe we can be friends? For Tamsin's sake, and for the sake of the good years we had together." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. But all I saw was genuine remorse and a woman who'd learned hard lessons about the cost of betrayal. "We can try," I said finally. "It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. But for Tamsin's sake, we can try to be friends." Relief flooded her features. "Thank you. That means more to me than you know." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Rhett? What you did to Mason." I was angry at the time, but I understand now. You were protecting your family. I respect that, even if I wish things had gone differently. After she left, I stood in the driveway for a long time, processing the conversation. The woman who'd just apologized to me was the Cambria I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. Humble, honest, and real. It was too late for us, but maybe it wasn't too late for her to find happiness with someone who could appreciate those qualities. As for me, I had a business to run, a daughter to raise, and a life to rebuild. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in months, it felt full of possibilities rather than threats. I walked back into the house that had been the center of so much conflict, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, it felt like home again. The war was over. Now it was time to build something better from the ruins.